The realization hit me when the ambient lights in the main data center flickered erratically, a dance they only performed when someone tampered with the core system's diagnostics. The problem was, it was a quiet Saturday, nearing 3 a.m. No one was meant to be there. Fast forward, and I was in the company parking garage, the night air surprisingly chilly, clutching a 12-pound encrypted server blade like it was my most precious secret. Do you think dedication is a myth? I was ferrying our company's entire historical dataset through a silent night, my backpack filled with energy bars and a thermos of lukewarm coffee. That was my routine every other Friday. Data integrity check day. I would swap the encrypted offsite drive, verify checksums, meticulously document everything, then secure it in a fireproof casing I'd installed in my car's trunk. Forget happy hours. I was all about preemptive damage control. Most people barely noticed. Only Chad did. Chad Harrison, our new head of engineering, was the type who polished his eyeglasses hourly and spoke of disruptive innovation like it was a spiritual revelation. He once told me during a dull Monday morning meeting that redundancy was a mindset, not a protocol. The same guy who brought his life coach to a software review, claiming we needed more agile thinking. Chad made it his personal mission to make light of my efforts during our weekly sync-ups. "Looks like Isla's got her digital fortress ready again," he'd quip. "Tell us, Isla, how will your legacy backup protect us from innovation?" The chuckles were always polite, a bit uneasy because deep down they understood I was the reason our systems hadn't cratered yet, but I'd be dishonest if I said it didn't wear on me. The comments, the subtle eye rolls, the relentless push for flash over fundamental stability. I never really minded being the quiet one. I thrived on my routines. I liked being the obscure safety net no one saw until the main system buckled. I never raised my voice, never stayed late unless it was my integrity check day. And every other Friday, I'd take the back elevator, cross the dimly lit garage in my heavy jacket, and carefully place that blade into its case, a sacred offering to the gods of uptime. I called it Aegis because no matter what storm hit us, Aegis always kept our core data safe. But that particular Friday, the one etched into my memory like a critical error log, I sensed it. A subtle shift in the atmosphere, like the office floor had subtly tilted under my sneakers and no one else perceived it. It began with an email at 9:47 a.m. from Strategic Initiatives. Subject: Operation Streamline. Initial review. Targets by noon. Chad had called an unscheduled team briefing. That usually meant someone was being downsized, or worse, optimized. He strode in, grinning like a man who'd just negotiated a major bonus. "Folks," he announced, "we're shedding inefficiencies, and that means rethinking legacy processes that don't scale." He looked directly at me when he said it. He didn't have to say my name. Then came the polite request from HR at 3:15 p.m. "Could you please document your current data integrity workflow in full detail, just so we can ensure continuity?" I wasn't even angry yet. I just started typing. But not everything. Not my proprietary protocols. Not the offline hooks. Not the fail-safe keys stored across 3 secured locations and a sticky note in my desk drawer. They didn't deserve Aegis. That night, I followed my usual path down the elevator, past the vending machine that only offered energy drinks and bad advice, across the deserted garage, and carefully placed Aegis into its case. The difference this time was I left the internal data mirror unplugged, not out of malice, but pure instinct. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew something was. I was halfway through my bi-weekly verification logs when Chad glided into my cubicle like a golden retriever with a tablet and a self-importance complex. "Hey, Isla," he chirped, as if we were old friends and not days away from me deleting all company messages. "Quick thing, the board's loving the lean strategy. We've cut 12% across engineering. Think minimalist design, but for our expenses." I didn't look up. I just tapped another command. Compare checksum/fault archive. No anomalies. Aegis was behaving as usual. Chad leaned in. I could smell his cologne, something expensive that still hinted at cheap ambition and green juice. "We're thinking your integrity cycles might be duplicative." I blinked once. "You mean redundant?" He grinned like I'd handed him a trophy. "Exactly. Redundant and redundant. Look, I'm all for disaster recovery, but we haven't had a disaster. That's a win, right? That's like canceling your antivirus because you haven't caught a virus yet." He kept talking, something about his new KPIs and how cloud-native solutions were the future. I let him ramble while I quietly disconnected the internal key I'd embedded within our central repository. It wasn't part of the standard stack. It was mine. Just a small patch of code that whispered between the cracks, my silent guardian. "Look," he said, placing a thin folder on my desk like it was a peace offering and not a veiled threat. "HR just needs a full documentation package. Processes, schedules, retention plans, off-site workflow in case someone else needs to pick it up. Purely procedural." I nodded, even smiled. The kind of tight-lipped, sure-thing smile that makes men like Chad believe they've triumphed. But something shifted in me that afternoon. It wasn't anger yet. It was subtraction, a slow, deliberate detachment. I opened my private repo, archived all my fail-safe branches. I didn't delete them, just moved them to cold storage and removed them from the main view. Like pulling the batteries out of your emergency radio before handing it to someone playing Apocalypse. That Friday, I packed Aegis early. Normally, she left at 7 p.m. That day, she was in my trunk by 5:01 p.m. Chad saw me leaving. "Clocking out early, Data Queen?" I didn't even answer. I just offered a slight wave, the same way you do when your neighbor's dog starts barking through the fence again. By Monday, Operation Streamline was in full swing. You could feel it in the sterile office air, desks being cleared faster than project deadlines. Half the QA team was gone. DevOps was consolidated into a trio of poor souls with tired eyes and overclocked laptops. One guy from UI/UX just stopped showing up. No one asked why. Meanwhile, I played along. I gave them documentation. Beautifully sanitized, utterly useless documentation. Timelines without executable scripts. Protocols without secure passphrases. Flowcharts with one major node labeled Custom Vault Sync, I. Collins only. They didn't question it. They didn't ask what the custom vault was. They never do. Not until everything goes sideways. And still, there was no official talk of my position being cut. Not yet. Just the slow erosion of my authority. They rerouted my ticket queue. Had me co-mentor an intern named Kevin, who kept asking if our core databases were stored on a public cloud drive. I got a Slack from Chad one night that read, "Hey, can we maybe just not do the Friday off-site rotation this week? Finance wants to pilot a zero-touch quarter." Zero touch, as in 0 cents. I didn't reply. I just silently adjusted my protocol. I set Aegis to manual only. No auto pulls, no triggers. Because if they were going to dismiss the Guardian, I wasn't leaving the keys under the mat. By Thursday, I'd memorized my exit path. Swipe out at 5:45 p.m., ignore the farewell pastries, walk calmly past HR's passive-aggressive candy bowl, and never look back. They believed they were buying efficiency with their cuts. They didn't realize they were mortgaging certainty for a bonus pool. And me? I just wanted to leave before the inevitable chaos erupted. But of course, chaos always finds its opening. It happened exactly how you'd expect a betrayal to land when it's cloaked in corporate jargon. Quiet, cold, and 15 minutes before the weekend. 5:45 p.m. Friday. The floor was already half empty, the air thick with the scent of reheated pizza and the stale musk of missed deadlines. I was finishing a final checksum verification on a compliance drive when my Slack glitched, booting me mid-message. A heartbeat later, an email landed. Subject: Transition Notice. Body: Effective immediately. Your role has been sunset. Please report to HR for final offboarding. Badge access will expire at 6:00 p.m. No warning, no meeting, no box of sad muffins, and a nervous manager pretending this wasn't personal. Just a digital guillotine drop and a wall of silence. I stood, straightened my jacket, which I always kept draped behind my chair in case the AC started pretending we worked in the Arctic again. As I walked down the hallway, Chad was waiting by the elevator, like some smug gatekeeper to perdition. "Finally cleared some dead weight," he said, sipping something green from a smoothie bottle that looked like it contained blended arrogance. "Nothing personal, Isla, just evolution." I wanted to say 1,000 things. I wanted to strip his veneer with my gaze. I wanted to show him the audit trails, the ping logs, the security reports he never bothered to read. But instead, I just smiled. A thin, deliberate curl of the mouth, like someone who just spotted the emergency exit while everyone else was dancing next to a sparking fuse box. HR was sterile. A clipboard-wielding lady recited a standard script. A severance packet, printed on thick paper with a "We appreciate your contributions" line that probably hadn't been updated since 2007. She offered me the cheap cardboard box with the sad handles that always folds weird. I declined. Instead, I walked back to my desk under escort. A young security guard named Dave, fresh out of college and already looking defeated. He didn't know who I was. He didn't recognize Aegis, sitting neatly in her sealed vault case beside my chair. I packed my coffee mug, my ergonomic wrist rest, a dog-eared paperback I'd never finished. Then I unplugged the off-site drive. No one said a word. No one asked what it was. Just a black box the size of a lunch tray, silent and sleek, with a red tag that read, "External only." Into my tote it went. Dave watched, as if he was checking for weaponized staplers or stolen monitors. But Aegis? She looked like any other piece of corporate hardware. He didn't even blink. I stood there for a moment, letting the stillness settle. The low hum of dying monitors, the soft sigh of a ceiling vent pushing air into a place that no longer welcomed me. Then I took out a sticky note from my drawer. I wrote my initials, IC, and the date. No threat, no snark, no last words about how they were blindly walking into a data abyss. Just a signature, a timestamp, a digital tombstone in blue ink. I pressed it to the darkened monitor and walked away. No tears, no trembling hands, just the quiet acceptance of something ending exactly as I predicted it would. When I reached the stairwell, I could hear Chad laughing through the closed doors of the conference room. I stepped into the dusk, Aegis slung low in my tote, like an unlit torch. They had just deleted the one person who knew where the matches were kept, and the gas leak was already hissing. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for the rot to reach the core. 14 days of dead silence from my old office. They'd scrubbed me from the building and tried to erase the memories. No farewell email, no LinkedIn pings, just a void, which was fine. I had Aegis, I had peace, I had a lakeside cabin that smelled of pine, independence, and old books, plus a wood-burning stove that didn't demand quarterly reports. And then, on day 15, my phone buzzed. It was a message on a secure line I hadn't used since I left. The contact was saved as Alex, intern who knows too much. "Is this still Isla's number? Please tell me yes." I didn't respond. I just stared at it. 3 hours later, another ping. "They're freaking out." Something hit production hard. That one made me pause. I opened my laptop, not to respond, just to observe. There are subtle clues in chaos, and I knew how to sniff them out. A few discrete queries to old, unexpired telemetry mirrors, ones Chad didn't know existed, revealed something sickly. Latency spiked, cluster heartbeat intermittent, traffic stalled, production was limping, finance backend dead, dev pipelines frozen like a forgotten winter landscape. I closed the lid. I let the panic stew. The next morning, another message. A new contact this time. Julia, QA, with high stress and 2 cats. All systems locked. Ransomware. $2 million demand. Everything's gone. They're trying to roll back, but the backups aren't working. A screenshot said it all. A big red screen, black font, $signs, a digital ransom note, the kind that doesn't bluff. No backups working. Of course they weren't. Chad had killed the mirrors, the auto-syncs, even the off-site trigger scripts I had hand-coded over 5 years of sleepless nights and cold coffee. He hadn't just dismissed the Guardian, he'd dismantled the protective system and handed the threat actor a key. Still, I said nothing. I didn't reply. I didn't type a single word. I brewed coffee, sat by the lake, and watched the fog roll in like it was my private Greek chorus, humming the tragedy unfolding behind conference room glass. The pings kept coming. Did you see the ransom demand? They're blaming you. Please, Isla, they said you took something. I chuckled into my mug, just a little exhale of amusement, because of course Chad would spin this. That smug, walking haircut probably stood up in the boardroom and claimed I ran off with the golden data goose, like some vengeful IT villain. But they didn't understand one simple thing. I hadn't taken anything. I just stopped giving it to them. They walked into that data center every day and thought the blinking lights meant safety. They thought uptime was a law of nature. They never once asked where the lifeboats were stored. And now, the ship was sinking. I checked my call log. 7 missed calls from an unknown number. 1 voicemail, no transcription, just digital static and a muffled expletive. I didn't press play. Instead, I poured another cup, opened my notebook, and wrote a single line. There, in the fire, now. And then, I turned the phone face down. I let the panic build, let Chad squirm. Sometimes, silence is louder than any alarm, especially when you're the one holding the fire escape. The spiral didn't start with a bang. It started with a rollback. Chad, in all his designer casual glory, stormed into the war room on Monday morning, like a man who thought yelling at error messages counted as leadership. Roll back everything. That was his solution to ransomware, to full cluster encryption, to a red screen ultimatum ticking down by the hour like a cartoon bomb from a wild fever dream. And so, the engineers tried. Bless their hearts, they really did. Kevin from DevOps, sweating through his hoodie, dug through cold storage arrays that hadn't been touched since spring break 2022. Julia from QA kept asking if she could just restore her project tickets first because she had an anxiety disorder and needed closure. Meanwhile, Chad paced like a parent trying to fix a broken toy by glaring at it. But nothing worked. Every backup partition Chad hadn't personally nuked was weeks old, out of sync, straight up corrupted from the last cost-saving compression cycle he'd mandated. The auto-sync logic I wrote, disabled. The off-site rotation script, commented out. The cold mirrors, gone. The real kicker, finance gone. Payroll gone. Every contract, compliance document, and customer record locked behind a $2 million Bitcoin demand and a blinking expired warning. Legal got involved fast, not because they cared about the staff, but because some of those files had regulatory teeth. Medical data, audit reports, names of clients who bought services they never wanted disclosed. If any of that got out, lawsuits wouldn't be optional. They'd be inevitable. So, the lawyers started asking questions. And Chad panicked like a squirrel in traffic. He stood up in the emergency board call and said, verbatim, "This is Isla's fault. She sabotaged us, stole the off-site keys, and planted something before she left. We've got no idea what she was running. Her whole system was a black box." Oh, Chad. Sweet, dumb, overly confident Chad. Because here's the problem with blaming the woman who built the damn house. The blueprints don't lie. Logs don't lie. Server access doesn't lie. And the company's own internal IT audit showed clearly, elegantly, in time-stamped glory, that Chad had signed off on the off-site decommissioning 3 weeks prior. His initials, his Slack approval, his words. No need to keep paying for legacy mirrors. This is dead weight. The same words he used when I walked out. And now he was standing knee-deep in the ashes, calling the arsonist me. Meanwhile, legal started taking depositions. Quiet, gray-suited people from risk management began circling his office like sharks that smelled bonuses bleeding out. A junior compliance manager leaked the memo that sealed it. Subject: Off-site decommission authorization. Final approval signed. C. Harrison. Date: 1 day before I was let go. But Chad still spun. He said I'd planted false backups to make him look bad. He said I withheld proprietary keys. He said I was disgruntled. Buddy, I wasn't disgruntled. I was done. There's a difference. Back in my cabin, I watched all this unfold through texts from interns, leaked screenshots, one very nervous voicemail from someone in legal who began their message with, "Hey, Isla, we just want to talk." I didn't answer. I was watching the exact thing I'd warned them about, the slow, painful collapse of a system that ran on borrowed confidence and ignored maintenance. They thought they were too sleek to fail. But you don't get to cancel your flood insurance and then act shocked when the basement fills with sewage. The irony? They did get what they wanted. A leaner, cheaper infrastructure, a bonus-friendly expense report, no more redundancy, and now no more business continuity. The ghost of my data logs haunted every meeting. The silence where Aegis's mirror used to be was louder than Chad's excuses. And me? I didn't need to say a word, because every locked file, every broken process, every useless rollback command spoke for itself. It was the endpoint. Of course, it was. Not the flashy ones they show off in board slides with acronyms and buzzwords stapled to them like resume glitter. No, it was the old one. The legacy endpoint from an app Chad called obsolete. The one I'd flagged 9 times for deprecation. The one he said we couldn't justify the development hours to patch. Guess what? The ransomware used it as a front door. When the security audit came in, HR's reaction was priceless. Apparently, when they saw the report, one of them actually dropped a granola bar mid-bite. No kidding. Julia from QA said she saw it roll under the conference table during the Zoom call. The endpoint was hard-coded with access that hadn't been rotated in 14 months. Chad had overridden the scheduled key refresh. Why? Because, and I quote, "no one uses that interface anymore." Wrong. The threat actors used it to crawl through a dusty pipeline straight into production, used it to drop a payload that turned their infrastructure into a graveyard of locked files and blinking warnings. That's when things started snapping. The board froze all bonus reviews. Finance halted Q2 reports dead in the water. Investors were sniffing around. Clients were reviewing their contracts. And Chad was running out of rooms to hide in. Word started spreading internally. Quiet rumors at first. Murmurs about who might have warned them, might have prevented it. That's when the junior engineer, poor Alex, bless his over-caffeinated soul, cracked. In a meeting with legal, he muttered it, almost like a confession. Isla had an off-site mirror. She called it Aegis. She used to swap it manually every other Friday, said cloud redundancy alone wasn't safe. Legal perked up like prairie dogs spotting a hawk. They asked, "Where is it now?" No one knew. So Chad made the call to me, 6 times straight to voicemail. My screen buzzed while I was on the porch, watching fog roll off the lake like it owed me an apology. I was wrapped in a wool sweater, sipping Earl Grey like a retiree who just outlived all her enemies. I let it ring. I watched the number flash. I watched the name unknown caller. I listened to the little vibration dance across the table. I smiled. Then it rang again and again. 8, 9, 12 times by dinner. The man who said I wasn't scalable now couldn't scale a disaster without me. Aegis was safe, powered off, hidden in a sealed case, bolted inside a storage chest beneath the floorboards of the cabin, still holding everything. Every log, every contract, every data chain Chad had erased in his desperate attempt to impress the board with lean ops. I opened a fresh page in my notebook. I scribbled, "When they can't fix the fire, they remember the one who warned them." I underlined it. I checked the call log. 15, then 22. I poured more tea, switched to whiskey, kept smiling because the flip had happened. The panic wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to the man who thought silence meant surrender, to the board that thought compliance could be optional, to the executives who thought non-essential applied to people like me. And I hadn't even begun negotiating. 3 days after the fog rolled in and Chad's calls went ignored, the offer came through. Not from him, of course. Cowards like Chad never say please with their own mouth. They outsource it. The email was from a law firm with too many names on the masthead and an animated signature that reeked of desperation masked as professionalism. Subject: request to open dialogue. Business continuity matter. Polite. Vague. Terrified. The body of the message read like it had been ghostwritten by AI in panic mode. Ms. Collins, reaching out in hopes of a mutually agreeable conversation regarding certain archival redundancies believed to be in your possession. Our client is prepared to discuss terms conducive to a swift and secure transition. Translation: we need Aegis now, and we finally realized you're the only one who ever knew how to use her. I gave them 12 hours. Then I replied, no emojis, no flourish, just a single paragraph and 3 non-negotiables. $350,000. The flat recovery fee. Full indemnity against all claims, investigations, or future liabilities related to the breach. A written apology from Chad Harrison, signed, dated, and addressed to me by name. Not to whom it may concern. Not dear former employee. No, I wanted ink and accountability. They replied within the hour. These terms may be subject to adjustment pending internal review. I didn't answer, so Chad finally broke his silence. This time, a different number. A voicemail. His voice cracked halfway through. Isla, come on, this is insane. We're all adults here. You're trying to ransom your own company. You think they'll forgive that? Think I will? I saved the recording for laughs. Then came the next email from the board. Tone drastically different. Agreed to the $350K. They offered the indemnity clause. Tight, clean, legally binding. But Chad, he tried one more trick. He contacted legal directly and suggested a workaround. He said he remembered the drive casing, claimed they could extract the data without my help. Just a matter of getting the right decryption tools, he said. What he didn't know, Aegis was password locked behind a rotating 2-factor system that refreshed every 18 hours. One half lived on an encrypted app buried in a virtual machine on my personal air-gapped laptop. The other, stored on a laminated NFC chip I wore around my neck during critical periods like a locket made of defiance. Even if they got the drive, they'd just be staring at the world's most expensive paperweight. The board slapped him down so hard the interns felt it. They sent a revised contract. Everything I asked, no edits. Then a scanned PDF appeared in my inbox, on company letterhead, signed Chad J. Harrison. The apology read like it had been carved out of his soul with a rusty spoon. I acknowledged that my decisions contributed directly to the failure of our continuity protocols, and that Ms. Collins' expertise was undervalued. I apologized sincerely for my comments, my actions, and the consequences that followed. He even used the word undervalued. That had to sting. I printed it, framed it, hung it on the cabin wall above the wood stove, right next to my fire extinguisher, because now I held everything. Aegis was safe. I had the keys. I had the legal protection. I had the money in escrow, waiting on a courier handoff. And Chad? Chad had nothing but regret and a digital crater where his bonus used to be. This wasn't revenge. This was a transaction. Cold, final, impeccably documented. Just how I like it. It was a Wednesday when the courier came. Black SUV, no logos. The driver wore tactical boots and a windbreaker that said, "Security in government font," like he was transporting nuclear launch codes and not the only functioning backup of a broken company's soul. He stepped onto my porch, eyes scanning the tree line like ransomware could hide in pine needles. No small talk, just a clipboard, a signature line, and a padded case with triple seal latches. Inside it, a heat-insulated foam chamber, a biometric lock, and enough dry ice to store Aegis like a precious artifact. I handed him the drive, wrapped in its original static bag, and then, with the calm of someone who spent years being mocked for caution, I slid an index card across the table. It read, handwritten in Sharpie, "Don't mock your data architect." Under it, the password string, 64 characters, case-sensitive, time-locked to expire in 48 hours unless synced with my rotating 2FA key, which I was no longer wearing. He nodded, tucked the card inside an envelope. "They'll get the message," he said. I bet they did. By Friday, the press release dropped. Not about Chad. Not at first. That came later. No. The first release spun the whole catastrophe like a tale of triumph. In the wake of a sophisticated cyber attack, our company retained veteran systems expert Isla Collins to assist in disaster recovery operations. Retained? They made it sound like I'd been in a meeting and said, "Sure, I'll pop in for a minute." No mention of my firing, no mention of Aegis, no mention of the fact that their retained expert was the same woman they accused of sabotage 4 days earlier. Chad's exit came the next day. No ceremony, no speech, just a one-line internal memo from the board. Chad Harrison has stepped down from his role as head of engineering, effective immediately due to critical oversight in continuity planning. Critical oversight. They could have just said hubris, but sure. Word spread fast. Industry blogs, online forums, even one tech podcast that used my story as a case study in operational blind spots without knowing I was the one sipping coffee while they pontificated. I didn't care, because the wire cleared at 8:06 a.m., $350,000. Clean, legal, final. I stared at the number in my account, then at the blank LLC paperwork on my desk. It took me 3 seconds to type the name, Plan B Solutions. Because there's always a Plan A. The sleek one, the pitch deck version, the overconfident CTO standing on stage talking about resilience while secretly ignoring patch updates. But me, I'm Plan B. When they forget until they're bleeding. I got my business license the next morning, built my site the next afternoon. Just one landing page. Disaster doesn't make appointments. Neither do I. But if you need help, real help, try Plan B. And I let the email inbox stay open. The requests started trickling in, quietly, from firms that read the subtext between those press releases, from heads of engineering who realized they had a chat of their own, from ex-colleagues who finally understood. They'd mocked me for years. Now they wanted to hire me. But I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I just kept a printout of Chad's apology tucked inside Aegis's case and a second red index card taped above my new monitor. Plan B starts when your ego ends. Let them come. Let the fires burn. I'd be ready. Sunday morning, the lake was glass. Not a ripple. Not even a squirrel silly enough to break the silence. Just me, a steaming cup of black coffee, and a quiet inbox ping that cracked through the calm like a matchstick snapping in a cathedral. "Can we retain you permanently?" The sender. Senior VP of Operations, my old firm. The same guy who once nodded along while Chad called me the backup lady, like I was their unpaid insurance mascot. Now he was asking if I could be retained like I was a luxury service, instead of the woman they laid off to save a sliver of Chad's bonus. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my phone's call history. I scrolled. 150 missed calls. No joke. 150. Chad. Legal. HR. Even Julia from QA, twice, apologetically. Most came during those first 5 days when the cluster was locked and the walls were closing in. But some came later. After the apology, after the courier, after the spin campaign trying to paint the crisis as a learning opportunity. Every single one unanswered. I flicked my thumb down the list slowly. Name after name. Names that used to interrupt my lunch. Names that forwarded urgent tickets at 4:59 p.m. on Fridays. Names that laughed when Chad made bunker jokes at my expense. Now they'd pay just to hear me think. My cabin's chalkboard was filled edge to edge with gigs. Government contract review on Tuesday. A fintech firm onboarding Thursday. A hedge fund begging for a custom continuity audit after their internal chat leaked a ransomware near miss. They barely survived. I was booked out for the year. Not because I advertised, not because I bragged, but because I had quietly, methodically, and without applause, been right. I hadn't exploited a single thing. I hadn't sabotaged a soul. I didn't leak, threaten, expose, or destroy. I simply unplugged Aegis, logged off, and let natural consequences finish the job. My form of justice was letting the system fail exactly the way it had been set up to once my safeguards were removed. No detours, no firewalls, no heroics, just inevitability. I looked at that new message again from the VP. I archived it, then I walked outside, sat on the dock, and let the sun burn warm across my face while the phone buzzed quietly in the cabin behind me, buried in soft wood and insulation, muffled like an old ghost still trying to beg its way out of purgatory. The world would always have unexpected events, but now it had a plan B too. And the next time someone calls meticulous preparation non-essential, I hope they remember my final line, written on every invoice, every audit report, every red index card I've ever handed across a polished conference table. Next time, ensure your foundations are solid, or be prepared to pay the person who built them. This story highlights the critical importance of valuing expertise and prudent preparation, even when it seems unnecessary during calm times. It teaches us that true efficiency isn't just about cutting costs, it's about building resilience. Ignoring warnings and dismissing dedicated professionals for short-term gains can lead to catastrophic long-term losses. The positive message is that dedication and foresight ultimately prevail. Isla's meticulous work, though undervalued and mocked, became the very thing that saved the company from utter ruin and paved the way for her own success. It encourages us to trust our instincts, uphold our professional standards, and remember that our contributions, even the quiet ones, hold immense value. It's a reminder to invest in your own skills and principles, because when others fail to see your worth, your capabilities will ultimately speak for themselves. Be your own plan B.